The Cathari were dying. Their beautiful crystal cities lay broken across 17 star systems, shattered like glass under the weight of an enemy they had never imagined could exist. For 1,000 years, they had lived in peace, growing crops that fed entire worlds and creating art that made other species weep with joy. They had never built a single weapon of war. Commander Zilthera stood in the ruins of what had once been the greatest library in the galaxy. Her transparent body shook as she watched the last of her people's ships flee into the dark between stars. The Vortok had come like a plague of locusts, eating everything in their path. They consumed planets, stripped worlds bare, and left nothing but dead rock behind. Her long fingers moved across the quantum transmitter one last time. This would be their final message to the galaxy. After this, there would be no more Cathari to send calls for help. "This is Commander Zilthera of the Cathari Collective." She spoke into the device, her voice barely a whisper. "We are the last of our kind. The Vortok horde has destroyed our worlds, killed our people, and scattered our children to the void. We offer everything we have left, our technology, our art, our remaining ships, to any species brave enough to stand against this evil. We know we are weak. We know we are not worth saving. But perhaps someone, somewhere, might have mercy on us." The message traveled across the galaxy at the speed of light, reaching every major civilization within hours. The proud Zephyrians, with their golden fleets that could crack moons, read it and deleted it. The hegemony of Sil, masters of 100 worlds, marked it as spam. The Cathari were nobody special. They were just another weak species about to become extinct. No one wanted to fight the Vortok for them, but the message traveled further than anyone expected. It reached a small blue world on the very edge of the galaxy, a planet most civilized species had forgotten about. Earth was quarantined by the Galactic Council, locked away from the rest of the galaxy because its people were too violent, too dangerous, too unpredictable. The Council had decided decades ago that humans were not ready to join civilized society. In a deep bunker beneath the mountains of Earth, Admiral Park Jiho sat with his staff, monitoring the galaxy's communications. They had been listening to alien radio signals for 50 years, learning languages, studying cultures, hoping for a chance to prove they belonged among the stars. When the Cathari message arrived, the room fell silent. The translation computers worked for several minutes, turning alien words into human language. When they finished, everyone stared at the screen. "The Vortok horde," General Kim Taeman said, his voice grim. He pulled up files on his computer. "We've been tracking them for months. Our deep space scouts have been watching them eat their way across the galaxy. They're not just conquerors, they're destroyers. They consume everything and leave nothing behind." Admiral Jiho read the message again. A peaceful species, crying out for help as they faced extinction, and no one was answering. "What about the big powers?" he asked. "The Zephyrians, the hegemony, all declined," his communications officer reported. "Every major civilization has ignored the call. They think the Cathari are too weak to matter. They won't risk fighting the Vortok for a species they consider worthless." Jiho stood up slowly. Around him, the best military minds on Earth waited for his decision. They had prepared for this moment for decades. They had built ships, trained soldiers, and developed weapons that would have horrified the galaxy's civilized species. They had done all of this knowing that someday they would need to prove they deserved a place among the stars. "Sir," General Taeman asked, "what are your orders?" Jiho looked at the message one more time. A dying species, begging for help that would never come. The galaxy's greatest powers had turned their backs on the weak. But humans had always been different. They had always been the ones who stood up to bullies, who protected the innocent, who fought impossible battles because it was the right thing to do. "Activate the fleet," he said quietly. "All ships, All divisions, we're going to war. The room erupted in activity. Orders flew across secure channels. Alarms began to sound across the planet as humanity's greatest military force prepared for battle. Ships that had been waiting in the dark between worlds received their orders. Soldiers who had trained their entire lives for this moment checked their weapons one last time. "Sir," his aide asked, "the Vortok have consumed entire star systems. They've never been defeated. Are you sure about this?" Jiho smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just found its prey. "The galaxy thinks we're too violent for civilization," he said. "They think we're monsters. They're about to find out they were right. But sometimes, monsters are exactly what the universe needs." In the depths of space, the human fleet began to move. Earth's children were going to war, and they would show the galaxy what monsters could do when someone needed saving. The Cathari survivors had never seen anything like it. One moment, the empty space around their refugee ships was dark and silent. The next moment, it was filled with hundreds of strange vessels that seemed to appear from nowhere. These ships were not like the elegant, curved vessels of the galaxy's civilized races. They were angular and sharp, like metal predators built for killing. Captain Velshin of the refugee ship Crystal Song felt his crystalline body shake with fear as one of the alien vessels opened a communication channel. The face that appeared on his screen was terrifying. The creature had eyes that faced forward like a hunter, white teeth that looked like weapons, and an expression of barely controlled violence that made him want to hide. "This is Admiral Lee, Sojin of the Earth Defense Force," the creature said. Her voice was cold and commanding, like the sound of breaking glass. "We got your message asking for help. We are here." Velshin could barely speak. You actually came. But the Vortok are death itself. They have eaten entire star systems. They cannot be stopped. Why would you risk your lives for us?" "Because someone has to stop them," Sojin said simply, "and we are the only ones stupid enough to try." The human ships began to move, and Velshin watched in amazement. These vessels did not fly like normal spacecraft. They moved like a pack of wild animals, darting and weaving through space in patterns. That made no sense. Where civilized ships flew in neat formations, these humans swarmed like angry insects. On the bridge of the flagship Indomitable, Admiral Sojin studied the tactical display that showed where the Vortok forces were positioned. The enemy had spread across the Cathari home systems like a disease, their living ships feeding on the planets, while their warriors hunted down any survivors. "Admiral," reported Commander Park Min-ho, "we are detecting about 3,000 Vortok vessels in the target system. Their bioships are massive. Some of them are as big as small moons." "Perfect," Sojin said with a smile that would have frightened civilized beings. "The bigger they are, the more they will think we are not a threat." The Vortok had ruled the galaxy's dark corners for millions of years. They were perfect predators, their ships grown from living tissue rather than built from metal. Their warrior castes were designed for nothing but conquest and destruction. They had never met a species that did not run away screaming when they arrived. Hive Commander Crackthil barely noticed the human fleet on his sensors. To him, they looked like just another group of primitives who had come to die gloriously against his forces. "Pathetic creatures," he growled to his subordinates, his insect-like mandibles clicking with amusement. "Another weak species that thinks it can challenge us. We will eat well tonight." The first battle happened in the outer part of the star system, where human destroyers met a Vortok hunting pack. What happened next shocked everyone who witnessed it. The humans did not fight like civilized beings. They fought like wild animals that had gone completely insane. Human ships rammed straight into Vortok vessels, exploding their own engines to cause maximum damage. They swarmed the larger enemy ships like angry bees, attacking from all directions at once. They fired weapons that violated every treaty about civilized warfare: nuclear bombs, kinetic projectiles that punched through armor like paper, energy weapons that had been banned by the Galactic Council. The Vortak hunting pack was destroyed in minutes. Not damaged, not driven off, but completely annihilated. The humans had absorbed casualties that would have made any normal fleet retreat, but they kept attacking with a fury that seemed to have no limit. Commander Craig Thal's amusement turned to confusion as he watched his forces being systematically destroyed. These creatures fought without any concern for their own survival. They seemed to enjoy the violence, to thrive on the destruction they were causing. What are these beings? He transmitted to the Hive Mother in the deep core of Vortok space. They fight like ... like us, but worse. They fight like they are already dead and do not care. The human fleet continued its advance, leaving burning wreckage behind them. The Cathari survivors watched in amazement as their would-be rescuers carved through the Vortok forces like a hot knife through ice. These humans were not noble warriors fighting for honor. They were monsters unleashed, and they were winning. Admiral Sojin stood on her bridge, watching the tactical display as her forces engaged the enemy. Her officers worked around her with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine, coordinating attacks that would have given nightmares to civilized strategists. "Ma'am," one of her officers reported, "the Vortok are requesting reinforcements from their main fleet. They seem confused by our tactics." Sojin smiled her predator's smile. "Good. Confusion is the first step to fear, and fear is the first step to defeat." The battle was just beginning, but already the galaxy was learning something new. The humans were not just another species seeking membership in civilized society. They were something far more dangerous. They were the thing that even monsters feared. The Battle of Keth Prime changed everything. For the first time in galactic history, the Vortok faced an enemy that was as savage as they were. The human fleet cut through the outer defenses like a hot knife through butter, using tactics that no civilized species had ever dreamed of. Admiral Park Ji-ho's plan was simple, but terrifying: make the Vortok afraid. The hive mind species had conquered half the galaxy by being the most frightening thing in space. They broke their enemy's will to fight before the real battle even began. But humans had spent thousands of years scaring each other with stories of monsters and nightmares. Now they were turning that skill against the galaxy's greatest horror. The human marines who boarded the Vortok bioships were like nothing the aliens had ever seen. These ships were grown, not built, with corridors that pulsed like veins and walls that bled when cut. The Vortok had designed them to be terrifying, but the humans walked through them like they were strolling through a park. Sergeant Kim Dong-hyen led his squad through the organic hallways of a Vortok harvester ship. Their weapons cut through the chitinous walls and warrior drones with equal ease. The ship itself seemed to scream as they carved their way deeper into its heart. "Contact front," Dong-hyeon shouted as a pack of warrior drones emerged from the ship's depths. The creatures were 8 feet tall, with natural weapons that could slice through most armor like paper. They had razor-sharp claws, acid spit, and mandibles that could crush steel. They had never faced an enemy that didn't run away screaming. The human marines opened fire with weapons that would have made civilized species sick. Explosive rounds tore through chitin and flesh, while incendiary charges turned the organic corridors into a burning hell. The air filled with the smell of burning alien flesh and the screams of dying monsters. "They're just like the monsters from the old movies," Private Yang Hae-won laughed as she sprayed fire down a corridor with her "Except these ones bleed real good." The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. The Vortak, who had spent millions of years inspiring terror in other species, found themselves experiencing it for the first time. The humans didn't just fight, they hunted. They turned the bioships into death traps, using the organic architecture against its creators. The humans seemed to enjoy the violence. They smiled when they killed, laughed when they set things on fire, and showed no fear, even when facing creatures that were twice their size. They fought like they were already dead and had nothing to lose. On the command ship, Hive Commander Craigthal watched his forces being destroyed with growing panic. The primitive species from the galaxy's edge was systematically tearing apart, his fleet using tactics that seemed to come from the depths of hell itself. "What are these creatures?" he transmitted to his subordinates. "They fight without honor, without mercy, without fear. They are worse than us." The humans had brought weapons that violated every treaty about civilized warfare. They used nuclear bombs in space battles, fired kinetic projectiles that punched through armor like it was paper, and deployed chemical weapons that dissolved chitin and flesh alike. They fought like the universe was ending, and they wanted to take everyone with them. But the worst part was how they seemed to enjoy it. The Vortok had always been efficient killers, but these humans were something else entirely. They were artists of destruction, painting the void with alien blood and finding beauty in the chaos they created. The second wave of Vortok forces emerged from the deep system, the true warriors of the Hive, creatures that had consumed entire civilizations and left nothing but dead worlds behind. These were the elite forces that had never been defeated, the ultimate predators that even other Vortok feared. Admiral Jiho watched the enemy reinforcements approach on his tactical display. There were thousands of them, bioships the size of cities crewed by warrior castes that had been engineered for nothing but killing. Any sane species would have retreated. Any civilized fleet would have called for reinforcements. Instead, Jiho smiled with the expression of a predator that had just found worthy prey. His bridge crew exchanged looks of anticipation rather than fear. They had been waiting for this moment their entire lives. "All ships, prepare for Phase 2, he announced over the fleet communications. "It's time to show them what real monsters look like." The human fleet repositioned itself with the fluid grace of a hunting pack. They didn't form the neat battle lines favored by civilized species. Instead, they swarmed like angry insects, attacking from all directions at once. Their ships moved with a controlled violence that was both beautiful and terrifying to watch. The Cathari survivors, watching from their refugee ships, could barely believe what they were seeing. These humans were fighting the most feared species in the galaxy and winning. Not just winning, but dominating. They were turning the Vortek's own tactics against them, using fear as a weapon more effectively than the aliens ever had. The battle was about to enter its deadliest phase, and the humans were just getting started. They had come to save the Cathari, but they were also here to send a message to the galaxy. Earth's children were no longer hiding in the shadows. The monsters had come to play. The real turning point came when the humans showed their true nature. They were not just warriors or conquerors. They were survivors who had spent millions of years fighting extinction on a death world that had tried to kill them every single day. And now, all that experience was about to be unleashed on the galaxy's greatest nightmare. The Vortok Hive Mother herself descended from the galactic core, bringing with her the accumulated might of 1,000 conquered worlds. Her ship was a monstrosity that hurt to look at, a living planet wrapped in weapons and armor, crewed by millions of warrior drones. It was the size of a moon, covered in spines and teeth and eyes that glowed with malevolent intelligence. This ship had never been defeated. It had never even been seriously challenged. The sight of it emerging from hyperspace should have made the human fleet turn around and run home. Any sane species would have taken one look at that abomination and decided that surrender was the better option. Instead, Admiral Park Jiho gave the order that would echo through galactic history. "All ships, execute Protocol Omega. Time to show them why Earth never made it into the Galactic Council." Commander Lee Soyoung coordinated the assault from the Indomitable's bridge, her hands moving across tactical displays that would have given nightmares to any civilized strategist. The screens showed weapon systems and battle plans that violated every treaty about humane warfare that had ever been written. "Deploy the Rippers," she announced calmly. "Release the Hounds." Authorization. Broken Arrow. The Rippers were humanity's answer to the Vortok bioships. They were AI-controlled drones that had been specifically designed to tear apart organic vessels. They looked like mechanical spiders the size of fighters, with cutting tools that could slice through living tissue and electronic systems that could hack into biological neural networks. The Hounds were worse, much worse. They were human Marines who had volunteered for experimental cybernetic enhancement, turning themselves into living weapons. They were still human, but they had been modified with artificial muscles, enhanced reflexes, and weapon systems built into their bodies. They were the nightmares that nightmares had. Captain Song Minjen led the first wave of Hounds as they boarded the Hive Mother's ship. His enhanced reflexes allowed him to move through the bioship's organic corridors like a ghost made of violence. His squad's weapons were works of art, each one crafted to cause maximum psychological impact on the Vortok or Idron. Remember, people, he transmitted to his team as they carved their way through the ship's defenses. We're not just here to win. We're here to make them understand why the galaxy was right to be afraid of us. The battle inside the Hive ship became a nightmare of corridors running with alien blood. The Vortok warriors, bred for conquest and engineered for killing, found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to have no concept of mercy or restraint. The humans fought like demons, laughing as they killed and smiling as they destroyed. The enhanced Marines moved through the ship like death itself, their cybernetic implants allowing them to interface directly with the ship's biological systems. They turned the ship's own defenses against it, reprogramming its immune system to attack its own crew and redirecting its weapon systems to fire inward. But the real victory wasn't tactical, it was psychological. The Vortok Hive Mother, a collective consciousness that had existed for millions of years, felt something it had never experienced before: fear. Not the simple survival instinct of a threatened organism, but the deep, existential terror of recognizing a superior predator. Through the neural networks that connected every Vortok across the galaxy, the Hive Mother broadcast a message that would change the balance of power forever. We have found something worse than ourselves. The humans are not prey, they are the thing that preys on predators. We withdraw. The Vortok fleet began to retreat, their bioships withdrawing from the system with a haste that would have been impossible to imagine hours earlier. Ships that had consumed entire civilizations were fleeing from a species they had never heard of before today. But Admiral Jiho wasn't finished. He had come here to send a message, and the galaxy was watching. All ships, pursue and engage. We don't stop until they understand Earth protects its own. The human fleet pursued the retreating Vortak across 3 star systems, systematically destroying their ships and liberating the worlds they had conquered. The humans didn't just defeat their enemies, they dismantled them, taking apart the Vortok war machine piece by piece, on worlds across the galaxy. Other species watched the battlefields in stunned silence. The Vortak, who had seemed unstoppable, were being systematically destroyed by a species that most civilized beings had never heard of. The humans fought with a controlled savagery that made even the Vortok look tame by comparison. The message was clear: Earth's children were no longer hiding in the shadows. They had come to play, and they played for keeps. The galaxy's greatest nightmare had just met something worse than itself, and it was running away screaming. The tide had turned, and the humans were just getting started. The pursuit of the fleet across 3 star systems became the stuff of galactic legend. The humans didn't just defeat their enemies, they completely destroyed the Hive's power structure, freeing conquered worlds and leaving behind military bases that would make sure the Vortok never came back. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Park Jiho received messages from across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire, which had ignored the Ketheri's cry for help, was now begging for a formal alliance. The hegemony of Syl wanted to discuss trade agreements. Every major power was suddenly very interested in making friends with the primitive species from the galaxy's edge. Sir? Commander Lee Soyoung reported, trying to keep the amazement out of her voice. We're getting a transmission from the Galactic Council. They're offering us full membership. Jiho smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the cold smile of someone who had just proven a point. Tell them, we'll think about it. After we finished cleaning up the mess they were too scared to handle, the Cathari survivors, rescued from the edge of extinction, struggled to understand what they had witnessed. Their crystal cities were being rebuilt by human engineers. Their people were being fed by human supply ships, and their children were being protected by human soldiers. It was more kindness than they had ever expected to receive. Captain Velshin, speaking for his people, could only offer the poor words of a species that had never understood warfare. During the victory ceremony on the rebuilt Keth Prime, he approached Admiral Jiho with a question that had been bothering him for weeks. Why? He asked, his crystalline voice shaking with emotion. Why did you come? Why did you risk everything for strangers? We had nothing to offer you. We are weak. We are few. We are nobody special. Why would you fight the most feared species in the galaxy for us? Jiho's answer would be quoted by historians for generations to come, because that's what humans do. We're not the strongest species in the galaxy, or the smartest, or the most advanced, but we're the ones who show up when the monsters need to be stopped. It's what we've always done, and it's what we'll always do. The human fleet remained in Cathari space for 6 months, helping to rebuild what the Vortak had destroyed. Human engineers worked alongside Cathari artisans to restore their crystal cities. Human doctors treated Cathari refugees who had been traumatized by the war. Human teachers helped Cathari children learn to feel safe again, but their real impact was psychological. The galaxy now knew that there was a species willing to stand against the darkness, regardless of the cost. Word spread through the galactic communication networks like wildfire. The humans had done the impossible. They had defeated the Vor and made them run away in fear. On Earth, the victory was celebrated not as conquest, but as validation. Humanity had proven that their exile from galactic civilization was the galaxy's mistake, not theirs. They had shown that being called too violent and too dangerous was actually a compliment. Sometimes, the universe needed violence and danger to protect the innocent. Admiral Jiho, promoted to Supreme Commander of Earth's Galactic Defense Force, stood in his office watching the stars with the satisfaction of a predator that had successfully defended its territory. The galaxy's weakest had called for help, and Earth's monsters had answered. The mission was complete. In the years that followed, the phrase calling for Earth's monsters became galactic slang for requesting help with impossible odds. When pirates threatened peaceful traders, they called for Earth's monsters. When raided colony worlds, they called for Earth's monsters. When ancient evils awakened from deep space, they called for Earth's monsters. The Cathari became humanity's first and closest allies. They had learned that sometimes the greatest strength comes from those who are willing to be monsters when monsters are needed. They built monuments to their human saviors, crystal sculptures that caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across their rebuilt cities. Other species began to approach Earth with offers of friendship and trade. The Galactic Council, which had once banned humans from membership, now competed with other organizations to win their favor. Everyone wanted to be friends with the species that had done what no one else could do. But the humans remained choosy about their allies. They protected those who needed protection and ignored those who had ignored others in their time of need. They remembered who had answered the Cathari's call for help and who had turned away. The Vortok retreated to the darkest corners of the galaxy, licking their wounds and trying to understand what had happened to them. They had been the apex predators, the ultimate nightmare, the thing that even other monsters feared. Now they were just another species that had learned to fear the humans. The galaxy was a different place now. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone knew it. The humans were no longer the quarantined primitives on the galaxy's rim. They were the monsters that other monsters had nightmares about. And when the next great threat arose, when the next impossible enemy appeared, the cry would go out across the stars. Call for Earth's monsters. They'll know what to do.